Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 6 of On Queer Street, the UK, Europe, actually, #1 boxing podcast by downloads. Don't believe any other nonsense that you might have heard in the past week. I am joined this evening by the one and only Mr. Paul David Webb. I think safe to say most popular and everyone's favourite member of the Next Big Pod. Wouldn't you agree, Paul?
Yes, and all podcasts that I've formerly been on, as Tommy Allen's called me a big podcast whore this week. But yeah, my third one.
You've been on 3 now. Oh, that's good. Nice. Well, we'll have to get you on. Actually, you don't want to go. Does the Coalition count as a podcast? I mean, it's, is it even radio? I don't know.
I can't say I've listened. Steve Wellings used to mention it, but I've never listened to it.
Yeah, same. Never listened to a single minute. I'm proud of it. We'll get you on the Boxing Voice at some point. We'll get you over on the American airwaves.
I listened to that Boxing News one, but I almost started taking medication at the same time, so I thought it wasn't a good combination with Matt Christie's voice.
Or you should try and what's Spencer Fearon's one called? I forget.
Toe to Toe.
Oh yeah, God.
Murderers Row podcast.
Yeah, I looked at that when on iTunes once, and then thought, no, I'm not adding that to my playlist. But anyway, thank you very much for joining us. We've got a fair bit to get through, and I know you've got to be away at about 9:30, so we'll try and do about an hour and 20 minutes. Starting off, as is tradition, with Housewives' favourite, 6 Degrees of Tony Dodson. Now, Paul, I deliberately didn't tell you this earlier, so I'll tweet it out now. This week's challenge, everyone, you should know the rules by now. You have to, same as 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, you have to connect fighter A to fighter B via common opponents, and the person who does it with the shortest route wins. What you win isn't clear because, amazingly, no one's actually managed to beat me at it yet. This week's isn't too bad. We are starting off with everyone's favourite Scottish fighter, best Scottish fighter of his generation, I think, undisputably. The man who iced Carl Frampton in sparring on numerous occasions, Mr. John Simpson. And point B is one of the greatest Brazilian fighters of all time, Mr. Acelino Freitas, a friend of Barry Jones. So that's John Simpson to Acelino Freitas in as fewer common opponents as possible. I've done it 2 different ways with 5 guys, 2 completely different ways. I can't get lower than 5, so that's the line. If anyone can do it in less than 5, then they win. They win something, maybe a T-shirt of some sort. But yeah, so 6 Degrees of Tony Dodson, John Simpson to Acelino Freitas, one champion to another. Now, Paul, I suppose there's only one place we can start, really. Bear in mind, I do the pod every couple of weeks, so the last one was the Haye Bellew preview. So I didn't know if you had any initial thoughts now that the dust has settled on Haye Bellew. I've tried not to think about it too much, given the amount of money I lost on the fight. But I just want to say before we start that you and I were the only ones, and I'm not going to say we picked the upset because we absolutely didn't, but we were the only ones who second-guessed ourselves during the week. Do you remember? I tweeted out, I feel like I'm missing something here, and you said I feel exactly the same way. Why isn't Haye 1 to 50 or whatever? Did you have a feeling during the week that it was sort of almost too good to be true?
It was one of those where it happens every single time you have like a big fight. You get all the nonsense before the main event. You get all the shows on Sky, and you do start to question things. And I had it, I think it was the Tuesday or the Wednesday of fight week, and I just thought, this is massively one-sided. Why isn't it? Yeah, why wasn't he 1 to 100? Why is this being talked about like it's a competitive fight? And obviously, you always get a lot of people that will bet on the underdog just because they look at the odds and they think, well, I'm not going to bet on a guy who's 6 to 1 on. Where's the money to be made there? But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I didn't, when the whole incident, when he went over to Germany to his doctor, I didn't read as much into that as I probably should have. I think I was a bit naive. I just thought, well, he's gone over, he's got a lot of money. If he's got a minor twinge, there's no reason why he shouldn't, fly over there. But I don't know. I'll be perfectly honest, I really couldn't work out how Bellew could win. And I didn't believe that David Haye shot. I still don't believe David Haye shot. It's worth pointing that out right away. But you couldn't foresee it. And I think that's why, even though it wasn't a particularly good fight, it was one of the most interesting fights I've watched in a long time. I was captivated by it. I was sat in the pub. I refused to buy it. Sat in the pub watching it.
Which pub did you go to?
This was the Crown in Lichfield. The scene of the
Wetherspoons.
Not a Wetherspoons, next door to a Wetherspoons though. So I was in there before for the cheapness, and then straight to the Crown. It was the scene where I watched a Joshua fight when a guy was telling me that Conor Benn was going to be a pound for pound future star. So it was just really interesting. I thought that Bellew's faced a bit of unnecessary criticism. I think you can't legislate for an injury, and I thought he actually fought a very smart fight. Bellew impressed me the most, not from rounds 1 to 6, where he was having to move and try and get out of the way of Haye. It was his attitude and what he did from 6 to 11, where he didn't rush in. He didn't try and blast Haye away when the opportunity was there. He was very smart, very measured, was very careful with his punches, and obviously eventually got the job done. I think you're going to get onto, is there too much celebration of Bellew's win? Yes, because he was fighting a guy whose leg looked like Aldi spaghetti. But what can you take away from him? No one really gave him a prayer. I second guessed myself a little bit because I couldn't see why the odds weren't wider, but I still very much went into that expecting an early Haye knock. I had the same. I had, by my standards, quite a bit of money on that fight. And as round 2, that wasn't actually, it was round 1. There's a bit in round 1 where Haye went at him twice and missed and got countered, and I thought, oh God, what's wrong here? And then I suddenly saw my money disappear down the tube. But
what was your bet? I had I actually didn't bet on Haye. I just bet on the fight to end before the 7th round.
Well, I had Haye round 2, and then I had Haye inside rounds 1 to 3, and then Paddy Power did a boost about an hour before the main event, and they put rounds 1 to 3 up to like 5 to 2. So I had the same bet twice. I thought, bloody hell, that's good odds. So I dived on that again. So I didn't have anything on the undercard. I looked at the undercard and hadn't really bothered, but I was just so sure that Haye would catch him, and it wasn't really about being disrespectful to Bellew. I just thought that Haye just hits far too hard, and he was getting him in place. Like he was manoeuvring him, and he was getting him into the corners of the ring. But he just, again, whether you want to blame the foot injury or not, he didn't seem to be able to take that little extra step to kind of close the gap. And I thought Bellew saw his punches coming a mile away. I don't think he really took that many flush shots throughout the fight. I thought his movement was just too good for Haye. And there's one thing I don't associate with Tony Bellew, and that's being fleet-footed and having great movement. But he looked pretty nimble in comparison to Haye. He was quite ploddy. Yeah, it was a bad night at the book. It's the worst one I've had since Fury Klitschko.
Yeah, I didn't actually bet on Fury Klitschko, but I hold my hands up. I picked Klitschko to win. I would have bet on probably a Klitschko KO. But yeah, I had I just couldn't see how the fight could go late. I thought the money was, there was more likelihood of Bellew sort of catching Haye with some miracle punch early on than there was of the fight going to the 11th round. I think the 11th round was something like 25 to 1 on the fight to even get there, let alone for Bellew to win in the 11th round. But yeah, no, it was a funny one, and I was exactly the same. I turned it on, and I put the bet on in the afternoon, and I said, and I asked my wife if I could do it because it was a fair bit. And she went, she said, do you think you're going to win? And I said, I'm 90% sure that the fight will end before 6 rounds. Then after about halfway through the 2nd round, she looked over, and I was like basically in a sort of praying position. And she went, what's wrong? Has your guy lost? And I went, no, I've just got a horrible feeling the fight's going to go a lot longer than I thought. And like you say, it was after Haye had missed a couple. And then I think maybe in the 3rd round, maybe the 4th round, Bellew took a couple of clean punches and he was totally fine. And then I thought, okay, there's something, Haye's just off here, because he's actually catching him, but he's not getting the same kind of explosive sort of force behind the punches. And then obviously my stream actually cut out. And then when I refreshed it, Haye was on the floor, and the commentators were screaming, and then he got up, and it was clear that the leg had gone. We've had a comment from Josh, who was on the most previous show, saying, hasn't Bellew kind of, I guess in a sense, undone some of the goodwill by saying things like pretending he didn't notice the injury and all that, when it was a blind man could have seen that Haye was injured, and there's video of Bellew's face reacting to Haye's Achilles giving out. How do you think Bellew's kind of played it? And do you think it's a case of him sort of, I don't know, do you think he really respects Haye, or is it a case of trying to big himself up in that sense?
Yeah, I think he always did, but it was difficult when when Bellew goes on like the John Bishop show, and he's been on the breakfast shows and stuff. What everyone's saying, oh, isn't it great that you won? What's he going to do? Turn around and go, actually, do you know what? I really won pretty much because my opponent got injured. He hasn't been. I don't think he's been as outward and bragging as he possibly could have been. I watched him on, I think it was on BBC Breakfast, I think it was, and I thought he came across okay. He basically said, look, David Haye was very disrespectful before the fight. Everyone wrote me off. It's not about what you look like, it's about what you can do in the ring. I've not heard him too many times go into how he thoroughly outboxed Haye and how he knocked him out. And I think that he saw the injury. That clip that you mentioned is brilliant. That when Haye takes that little step back and his leg just unravels, and Bellew just almost sort of smirks at him as if he'd say, "Oh, what's going on there then?"
Yeah, he kind of nods, doesn't he? He acknowledges like, "Oh, that looks painful."
Yeah, I mean, things like Bellew's gone from being a world champion to be sort of a respected fighter for in the boxing circles, but. Let's get it right. He had a mare with him when he fought Cleverly on pay-per-view. That was his chance to be a real kind of crossover star. And he won the fight, but it was a bit of a disaster. Now, I kind of can't begrudge him a little bit. I mean, you're seeing him, all that Dave, I was saying the week before the fight, who would it be better if it won? I said it'd be better if Bellew wins, because I genuinely think that David Haye is on such a cash grab, not interested attitude towards the sport, the disrespect I think he's shown the sport, and this is coming from someone who drove to Germany to watch him fight. I followed Haye around everywhere, and he was my first real, not sort of fighter I would go anywhere to fight. If he'd have fought Klitschko in America, I'd have gone to America. That's the kind of thing I thought of Haye. But Bellew's in a great position now, and he's a big star, and I can't begrudge him that. If you look at the last 12, 18 months he's had, it's been fantastic, and you can pick holes in it as you can with any fighter. But I'm really interested now as to what's the next thing that Bellew does, because all of the champions at cruiserweight and heavyweight will still think they could knock him out easy. So he's been called out by everyone.
Yeah, and since the stinker against Cleverly, like you said, he has, at least the fights have all been dramatic, even if it's been a bit of a freak show at times. They've, even the Flores fight, I remember watching that the day before the Haye fight to just see if I could pick up anything. And even that was quite a fun little, stupid little scrap. Obviously Flores was totally outmatched, but lots of knockdowns. Fight ended in 3 rounds or whatever, 4 rounds or whatever it was. So since Cleverly, he's been pretty exciting generally. And like you say, I think Haye, I think the problem was, we saw that he could make money fighting absolutely no one, whereas Bellew at least knows that he'll need to fight a Wilder or or a Haye rematch or whatever it is. He'll need to fight some sort of name. Bellew won't be able to go to the Echo Arena and fight Arnold Jurjai, will he, and sell it out.
No, he's certainly not there. He's certainly not there yet, and that's the thing now. If you're Tony Bellew, you've just earned a lot of money from that fight, but it's always that thing. Whatever he does next, if he gets the right opponent, will be a massive fight. And I certainly, same again, I wouldn't pick him to beat the names that we just mentioned, your Wilders. He wouldn't fight Joshua, but the Tyson Furies or the other cruiserweight champions, I still probably wouldn't pick him in any of those fights. But he's got options now, and at the Haye rematch, it's a shame it'd be so far away, because realistically, Haye's going to be out for a good long time. I'd watch that, because even though it doesn't have to be a brilliant fight for you to want to see it again. I thought it was just very, very, it reminded me a bit of the last, in theory, mismatch that was on Sky Box Office, with the Brooke Golovkin fight, which everyone going into it saying it was going to be a complete one-sided mismatch, and it was in the end. But it was very interesting for 2-3 rounds. You couldn't take your eyes off it. And I enjoyed it, and I'd want to. And it wasn't the same kind of fight, though, because Golovkin didn't smash him.
But would you want to see Brooke Golovkin again, though?
No, not right now. But I wouldn't be opposed to it in the future. I know a lot of people make a big deal of how much of a beating Brooke took, and he did. And they are the wrong weight divisions, but anything can happen in time. I certainly wouldn't be dead set against it. But for me, if I want with Bellew now, he's talked about being comfortable at the weight at heavyweight, but he was too heavy. You know, I think even he'd probably admit he came in kind of half a stone too much. And I think if he was in there with someone who was sharper, who wasn't injured, I think he'd have struggled. But him against Wilder, that's a biggie, because Wilder,
I'd watch that. Yeah.
Yeah, he could absolutely nail Bellew senseless in a round, but he's so crude and so basic. Bellew's a much better boxer than Wilder is. That's one. If I was to pick a non-Haye fight for Bellew that I'd want to watch, I would pick Wilder.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. You know, he's talking about, I'd take the Joshua fight. I'm sure Bellew would take the Joshua fight. I've got no interest in that. I'm sick of seeing. Someone said the other day that Joshua is in a unification, having fought something like 44 career rounds, and I'm just that sort of really shocked me. And then I worked out that it was actually probably true. And I'm not interested in any more novelty fights for him. But I think, yeah, like you say, Bellew's a better boxer than Wilder. Wilder doesn't have a great chin. You know, I've got no doubt Bellew could hurt him if he landed. We've seen, you know, comparatively sort of feather-fisted guys at heavyweight hurt Wilder before, and equally, you know, Wilder has that power that could lay, you know, the sort of Adonis Stevenson type power that could lay Bellew out. That would be a great fight. I think, yeah, I'd happily watch that, provided the undercard was slightly better than what we got on the Haye Bellew card. If we lead into that just quickly, you said that you wouldn't mind seeing Bellew versus Haye again. Would you mind seeing Derry Matthews again after an absolute shell of the fighter who was once pretty exciting, got into the ring against O'Hara Davis? Should we just quickly skip over that, and then we'll get on to the Eggman, your favourite?
Yeah, the frustrating thing with the Derry Matthews fight is it's that Matthews has been given these opportunities now against guys on Sky shows, where Matchroom, when Derry was in his, because he's never really had a prime, has he? You know, his career's been in about 5 different stages, but when he was certainly performing at a better level, he wasn't getting these kind of fights.
Yeah, 3 years ago, he was completely blacklisted, wasn't he? They wouldn't put him anywhere near a prospect, like, because there was a chance he could win. And then as soon as the Flanagan fight happened and it became clear that he was shot, and we said this at the time, I actually think on the Next Big Pod at the time, I said I thought Matthews looked shot against Flanagan, or looked like he was sort of on the precipice of being shot. And then, you know, he got blown out by Luke Campbell. And as soon as he got done by Luke Campbell, Hearn was talking about O'Hara Davis. He was talking about Tommy Coyle again. He was talking about all these different guys. And it's just so transparent, isn't it? The minute it becomes clear that he's got no chance to win, suddenly he's on every single show. And I thought it was, you know, we predicted that Matthews would retire. We all predicted that O'Hara would beat him. I have to say, I thought it would go the distance. I thought that Davis might try and box him a bit more. I didn't think Matthews was that much of a sort of shell of himself, but he looked, and look, this is no disrespect to him at all, because he's had like 65 fights or something, but he had no business being in there, did he, the other week?
No, it was, I mean, O'Hara looks an interesting, ignoring what he does outside the ring, he looks an interesting prospect, but he was tailor-made, Matthews was, to take a beat in there. I remember seeing him years, about 2012, 2013, I was there when he fought Stephen Ormond, and he looked, he showed how he could be outboxed and how basic he can look at times, but he had the power. And he went on his little mini run of decent results, but he looked far too slow when he fought Campbell. He couldn't react to the punches. He couldn't react to Campbell's movement. So you go, okay, well, Campbell's a very quick fighter, very fast hands. Well, O'Hara's the same. You know, it was serving him up again for a cannon fodder knockout, and it served its purpose for O'Hara and for Matchroom to say, look, this prospect's just beating a former world title challenger, absolutely blown him away.
But is cannon fodder good enough for a pay-per-view? Do you know what I mean?
No, and this is the thing, that Matchroom's pay-per-view undercards have been sort of very much up and down. I'm always trying to work out what they want to get from them, because pay-per-views invariably are going to be watched by more casual fans. Casual fans want stoppages, they want knockouts. So I kind of get why you'd make a fight like that, because Derry's normally quite exciting to watch, whatever he's doing. But now that was his 9th knockout or his 8th knockout. He's been stopped that many times, and
it's more than 5 times, definitely. Yeah,
it was poor, really. I think people would have watched that and gone, okay, well, that kid Davis looks decent, but that guy who was fighting was shot. And I think, obviously, it's a payday for Derry, and it's his last fight. He takes that into his retirement now, and he does a lot of stuff in Liverpool.
Yeah, and he was on Box Nation. I don't know if you watched the Conlan card last Friday, but he was on there. He was doing his commentary. He looked totally fine, and look, good for him. He's a decent guy. He was a good fighter in his day, and he fought everyone. So absolutely no ill will towards him. But I think my issue with the undercards is that a couple of years ago we mentioned Bellew cleverly earlier. That featured an undercard of mismatches, but it was name fighters against overmatched opponents. Now it's prospects against overmatched opponents. Do you know what I mean? It's even more watered down. And it's really like, I look back at Bellew cleverly, that looks like a decent card now compared to what we're getting this year.
Yeah.
And
well, sorry, you can almost add it. You can almost add it up. So if you've got the card in front of you, you can almost you work it out in terms of what was actually spent on that, and it's nothing. Katie Taylor's opponent would have been on no money. It's not like he's paying Ted Cheeseman lots of money. Dave Allen, David Howe, they'd have been on nothing. But that's counted as a televised fight. Yeah. Obviously, it was Lee Selby's last fight of his deal with Matchroom, so he'd have been on the basic amount. His opponent would have been about 45p. And then obviously, again, Malignaggi is probably the most expensive B-side on that card. He would have been the most expensive B-side on that card. But it's not like he's paying Sam mega money either. So that undercard would have cost nothing to put together, considering that fight did 600,000 pay-per-views plus.
Did it?
People think it was a monster, apparently. Yeah,
but they always say that, and they never release the numbers. And the amount of people who are streaming it, I think Hearn massively overstates. Here's a question: do you think anyone, and you probably know a bit more about this, I've got no real idea what the lower end of the purses looks like in terms of what kind of your Eggingtons and your O'Hara Davises are earning. Would any of them have been on more than 50 grand? Anyone on that undercard? Maybe Paulie?
Paulie and Selby, I'd have said it would have been the two, even though Selby was way down the card. I think he'd have been on good money. But none of them are on, none of them would be on 100. I always classes.
They're not on six figures, are they? Yeah.
No, exactly. You look at that Cleverly Bellew card; there'd have been six figure purses on that.
Yeah.
And I think especially when you go up in weight, and that's just another trick that Hearn's taken on recently. He's become very interested in small guys, and the reason being is because they're cheap.
Yeah.
So if you have a super middleweight chief support, you're paying a lot of money for that. If you've got a light heavyweight chief support, you're paying a lot of money. Invariably, if you whack on little guys or Katie Taylor, you can fill up the card for nothing. And that's why Kal Yafai got the shot on the last pay-per-view. The Joshua one was because it's a world title fight, but it would have cost nothing to get that on.
Yeah. Whereas you look at... compare it to something like Liam Walsh against Gervonta Davis. Think about how much money Davis will be on to come over here. Or look at. I mean, actually, I don't know about Brooks Spence. That might be a slightly different one because it's a mandatory. But you'd think, if that was a unification or something, and it's a glamour welterweight, they're going to be on big money to come over. Whereas, Concepcion would have been on fuck all, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like obviously, I think we'll get onto it, the Callum Smith situation, but Hearn bid 1.2 million for that. Now, would that have been a main event in its own right, or what would they have done with it? But that's the kind of money you have to pay for a good, not a great, but a good fight in certain weight classes. It is just so much more expensive. So they have been careful with it. But again, I don't really know of undercards at the minute on certain shows. I've always said, give me, and this goes when I'm watching it at home, and this goes for being in the arena, give me less fights, but better fights. So give me a 4-fight card with maybe a kid on the bottom, but with 3 evenly matched fights or better quality fights. I mean, I'm going to that one in Birmingham we'll get onto in a bit, but I was looking at it earlier and I was like, Jesus, that's like 6 hours worth. And people make out that's a great thing, but it's not. You don't need to sit from 6 p.m. till 11:30 to watch boxing, especially when you're watching David Allen and Katie Taylor. No disrespect to Katie Taylor, I completely get what they're doing with her, but these fights are just. We don't know who they're fighting, but we know nothing about Monica. What was it, Monica Gentil? We don't know anything about this girl, and that's a problem at the minute. He's using certain fighters as easy filler on pay-per-view, and he's going back on better quality undercard fights. I think obviously the main event was very expensive. Haye would have been on a lot of money. Bellew was on a lot of money. So maybe they just didn't want to spend. And that has happened before. We saw that with Quigg Frampton. He just didn't want to spend the money. Or McGuigan didn't, according to Hearn.
But I think in that case, there's nothing wrong with something like Joshua Klitschko, right? I'm not going to it, but there's a chance that I will pull together with some mates and pay for the pay-per-view because, first of all, it's a pay-per-view worthy fight. There's no way that fight could ever be made without pay-per-view. And secondly, for something like that, if Hearn said, do you know what, I'm just going to stick 2 fights on the undercard and it's going to be like, I don't know, it's going to be Scott Quigg in a 10-rounder or whatever, and then one other. I'd say that's fine. People are paying for the main event, aren't they? And I think that's completely fine. But like you say, with something like Callum Smith against Anthony Dirrell, that's not enough in its own right to justify 16 quid. You actually have to put meaningful fights on the undercard, which Hearn has shown a complete reluctance to do.
That's exactly right. Because when I went to Brook Golovkin, I watched bits of the undercard. I watched Pigface getting knocked out, and then I didn't watch much of the whole fight. I was in and out, but it was there for the main event. As far as watching at home, I'd been watching it for the main event. There's been that many big pay-per-view fights or shows that I've been to where I've almost forgotten what the undercard was or who was on it. I was looking back.
Do you remember we said? I think we said last year. Sorry, just on that subject. I think it was about 2 weeks after Frampton Quigg, and I asked everyone, can you name a single fight from the undercard? And within 2 weeks, everyone had and I couldn't think of any either. Like, we'd all completely forgotten them all because it was that. I couldn't name you a single person who was Conrad Cummings on it? That's probably the only name I could guess. And he was probably fighting a 6-rounder or something. Yeah. Sorry, you were saying, Paul.
Yeah, it's exactly right. I mean, one of my favourite fights I ever went to live was Foxgroves 1. And I can't tell you who was. If you were to ask me now, I could probably really think, but I can't tell you who was on that undercard. I couldn't care less. And sometimes when the main event is that good, then the undercard just doesn't matter as much. But when you've got a weak show or a weak main event, or one that potentially could be over and done in a round, you do need to have good fights. But like I said, give me less. That's why the Wembley cards will work because they have to have fewer fights on anyway because of time restrictions.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't want a 7 or 8 fight card pay-per-view. I want a 3 or 4 fight, but with quality throughout. Not, I like the Dave Allen story. It's funny, but why is that really where we're at? Where we've got novices in Katie Taylor, the Conor Benns of this world, and Dave Allen on pay-per-view shows. Put them on TV if you want. I don't really have an issue with that. But, this is meant to be a premium product, and they are not.
Yeah, they're not exactly. Look, women's boxing's kind of a red herring in a sense because I don't give a shit if it's Katie Taylor fighting for for unifying a division. It just doesn't really interest me. So I won't slag it off when it's a bad fight because to me, I'm not really going to be paying attention either way. I've got a hypothetical for you. Let's say Brook versus Spence is going to be on pay-per-view, and early rumours suggest that it will be. What would you take as an undercard for that? Would you take something like, I don't know, White Chisora 2 or something like Luke Campbell in a final eliminator or in a world title fight, something like that?
Yeah, I think obviously White Chisora would be an obvious one, but that's going to be its own show. If that happens again, that would be a standalone event. I'm 99% certain of that. I think it could do a standalone event, not on a box office show, but on a regular Sky Saturday night.
Yeah, but White's saying it has to be pay-per-view, isn't it? This is how kind of inflated the bubble is and how deluded so many of the fighters are. That White was saying, to get the rematch on, it would need to be pay-per-view. And like the idea of that, a domestic level heavyweight fight, between guys who've lost multiple times at the top level, headlining a pay-per-view, an undercard like that would have to be absolutely stacked to justify it. But can we just jump on? Sorry, Paul. Before we go down the rabbit, go on, mate. Sorry, finish off. Yeah,
I was going to say it's whether you go down the cut thing of is it names or fights, and that's the Hearn.
But it's neither at the moment.
Has done, but yeah, he's tried to do both and not done either particularly well. Stacking shows with A-sided names against Dross doesn't work. Putting on low quality fights and just novices doesn't work. I think he'll hopefully get there, and I think Brooks Spence will need something, because people just, even now, people don't care enough about Kell Brook.
No,
That's just a fact. They
don't. He won't sell Bramall Lane out on his own, or he won't sell the O2 out on his own. No chance. He'll need a big. Golovkin sold a lot of tickets, didn't he, for that fight at the O2? If they're trying to claim that was sort of a Kell Brook crowd, obviously a lot of casuals there wanted the British guy to win, but a lot of people came to see Golovkin. Whereas, are a lot of people in Sheffield? We follow Cal and Ainsey. People in Sheffield they're morons, aren't they? They're dangerous. Dangerously moronic. They're not going to be showing up to watch Errol Spence. This guy's an Olympian who beat Chris Algieri. No one's going to give a shit. They're going to say, we'll go and watch Kel, and if you give us a couple of big guys knocking 7 bells out of each other on the undercard, we'll be happy. I think Campbell would make sense for that card. Not that I can see it happening. I've got a feeling he might have to travel for his shot. Can I ask you, Paul, just before we go down the rabbit hole completely? The final sort of significant card from Haye Bellew was the final significant fight, I should say, was Malignaggi against Eggington. And again, Eggington, obviously a proud son of Stourbridge. Are you from anywhere near Stourbridge, or the other side?
No,
You're from the other side of the city.
Wrong side of Birmingham. Yeah. So
you're from the wrong side of the track. Wait, can I ask just before? I thought he would stop Paulie late, just because I thought Paulie's legs had gone. But I was actually quite impressed with Eggington. I thought he sort of, again, he was quite disciplined. He didn't sort of let the crowd get to him. And I say disciplined, not as in sort of, he was hit and not get hit. I just mean he knows what he wants to do, doesn't he, every time he gets into the ring, and he just charges, continues forward. And there's a lot of Margarito in him, which I love, because obviously Margarito is one of the best ever. Has he got an opponent for that European title fight that's just been announced?
Yeah, so it's Serafino Rodriguez is who he's fighting on May the 13th. I thought that, again, it was weird. When I watching the fight first time, they didn't put the frigging sound on. So it was quite weird watching it. And I thought he was doing really well. But on the scorecards, at least, Malignaggi got a good even shake of that the first sort of 4 or 5 rounds. But he was far more patient. I remember I was there when he fought Bradley Skeet, and he just chased Skeet round the ring. And it looked like there was he was very one-paced. It was a fast pace, but it was just running at him, and Skeet just picked him off completely. I think he had moments where Malignaggi was landing 3 shots on him, or was consistently landing that jab. But I think Sam knew that, Paulie couldn't hurt him. Paulie can't hurt anyone, never has been able to. So all he had to do was be in his face. And in the end, the shot that stopped the fight, I loved it. That was a peach of a shot. And he is, Margarito, the style is a good comparison, a very, very, you could say a very basic version of it, but he's a big guy at that weight, and he's going to be in your face, and you've got to be strong enough to push him away, but then also be quick enough, because as it was shown when he fought Gavin, a little bit against Malignaggi, and certainly when he fought Skeet, from a pure technical boxing point of view, he's still very basic, and he can be out jabbed by a large number of fighters. Rodriguez, Pops was abusing me because I said it was a good fight. I'd never seen Rodriguez fight. I don't know anything about him, and that was the one disappointment with that card. Was I hate having to Google people. I know everything, and I don't. But yeah, so that fight is more about the belt than anything else. I mean, Rodriguez is one of Sergio Martinez's fighters. He seems to have everyone who's relatively decent who's Spanish is under Martinez's banner. But yeah, I don't think he's fought much out of Spain. I know he's had the one loss, but I couldn't tell you who it was against. I just don't know.
He was the guy who robbed Garrido. Oh my God. Do you remember that? About 2 years ago, Garrido fought, there was that clip going around on YouTube where Garrido fought in Spain, and he lost a decision, and then he was going mental, and he was like kicking the ring post and stuff. Do you remember that video? Carpi was.
I remember it.
He was sharing it all. Apparently, that was against this guy. So basically, this guy should have lost to Garrido. So I think we're talking. Eggington should be the favourite, right? We can say.
It's literally a belt. It's a box ticking exercise in terms of belts. It gets him the EBU title, presuming he wins the fight, because you can tell they're kind of almost ready to throw him in with a big opponent, but they've just got to be careful because, like I said, he's only 23. And it seems like the time is now to throw him in with something better, or certainly a world level guy. But I just, and I'm a big fan, so I'm saying this as a big fan of his. He's not ready. I don't think he's ever going to be. So do you do it now?
Yeah,
and risk a Charlie Edwards or not? I don't know.
Exactly what I was going to say. I like Eggington. He seems like a decent guy. He's a very honest fighter. He's not chatting shit in interviews or anything like that, and he always brings action. But yeah, like you say, no disrespect to him, he's never going to be ready for a Thurman or a Pacquiao or a Garcia, is he? Or a Kell Brook. He's never going to be ready for that. But could he maybe one day be ready for a I don't know. I'm looking down the list. A guy like, I don't know, Avanesian, who fought the other week against Peterson. Could he be ready one day for a? Oh God, I'm looking down the list now. Algieri, Bizier, Robert Guerrero, Luis Calazzo, sort of fringe top 20 guys, maybe.
I think that's what he needs, because if you look at the people that he's fought, he hasn't really. Obviously, it's all been English, British level guys. Malignaggi was the first fighter who brought a slightly different style, and was obviously more well schooled than the guys he's fought previously. But he's never fought. He's not been in with an American or a Mexican really before. I want
to see him in with someone. I want to see him in with someone who will. Like when they put Margarito in with Williams, a guy who's going to do the exact same thing right back to him. I want to see another guy with a great chin who's just going to, and they're going to combine to throw 1,400 punches. That's all I want, And there's no shame if Eggington loses like that. Just do the fight again. No one is expecting. He's playing on with house money, isn't he? Because no one expects him to win a world title. No one ever expected him to even be ranked in the top 20, which he probably is now. So a guy like Granados, who we saw against Broner recently. Granados might beat him, probably make him a slight favourite, but that will be a great fight. Two guys who throw a lot and who come forward, and it's just non-stop exchanges. I would watch that over a fight like, no disrespect to him, but I'd watch that over a Kalyafai 120, 108 easy defence of his title any day of the week, whether there's a belt on the line or not.
Well, this is the problem they're going to have on May 13th, because Kalyafai will have to be the main event. But the reality is, Sam Eggington's the biggest fighter in the Midlands.
Does he sell a lot of tickets, Eggington?
They all, well, to be fair, they all do. The East Side Gym, John Pegg has them all well schooled, and they do sell a lot of tickets. And he is the most popular fighter probably from a numbers point of view right now in the Midlands. But they all do, because there is no box office take in the Midlands at all for boxing. That show I went to, it was Gavin Eggington. The majority of the crowd were tickets that were bought from the fighters. I think Hearn said something like they'd done 400 tickets at the box office, which bear in mind there were 6,000 there.
Yeah, and so it's all done directly through just sort of calling up or messaging the fighter themselves and just picking them up. We've had a good one in the chat. I know he's slightly bigger than Eggington, but something like Eggington versus Kamagai. Do you remember the guy who knocked out Soto Karas late last year? Again, look, this isn't a pound for pound fight. It's not a final eliminator. No one gives a shit if there's a silver title on the line. That's just great action, and that's the sort of fight that pretty much any network. I reckon HBO would have that fight as a co-main, genuinely. And people would say, "Oh my God, Eggington's on HBO," and then the commentators would say, "Yeah, because that's just guaranteed action, and that's what people want to watch. They don't give a shit if Eggington's got the regular WBA belt or not. Like, it's a really good fight. I think he can make some decent money in his career, because there's a lot of fighters you can put him in with at that weight. He might lose, but it will always be good action, and people will come back to see him."
Absolutely, I think that's what they've got to do. They've got to not worry about the belts. I think with him, it's going to be about how can we match him well? Who can we put him in with, which is going to work? And you can then, a fighter like him is transferable. So he's a Birmingham fighter who fights on Birmingham shows, but you can put him on a Joshua undercard. You can put him on a Kell Brook pay-per-view undercard, because whether you know him or not, you'll watch him because he's good to watch. And it sounds like a very, very basic thing, but there's a lot of fighters who have had amazing careers with very limited ability, but because they're exciting, and people, like you say, would rather watch that. If that Birmingham show, from a talent point of view, he's below Gamal, below, you could argue, Frankie, even though he beat him, but from a pure talent point of view, below Cal by a long way. but he's the most exciting fighter on the card. And people will want to see him. People watching at home, depending how the fight will go, will more than likely enjoy that more than the other fights on the card.
Yeah, and if I'm sat at home watching that on Sky and someone says, "Oh, what's the fight you're most looking forward to tonight?" Obviously, I'm not going to be over the moon about any of them, but I will say, look, if I had to choose one fight to watch, it would be Eggington every single time. And like you say, yeah, he's not as skilled as the others, but that's not what we necessarily always watch boxing for. He always gives you value for money, doesn't he? Like even against Skeet, he was like trying his arse off. He just couldn't. It was just a bad style matchup. And there's no shame in that. Boxing is about styles, and there are styles that can beat certain people. And 99 times out of 100, and Skeet would beat him 9 out of 10 times, wouldn't he? But there's no shame in that at all. I'd still rather, and I like Skeet, but I'd rather watch Eggington fight than Skeet. If you give me a random matchup. Right. Sorry, I'm just concerned that we haven't gone on to just a quick one. And we're going to do the sort of usual format of, rather than recapping it directly, I'll just ask you a question based on sort of the events. Jamie Conlan obviously picking up a split decision over that. I forget his name. Rodriguez. Yeah, I think his name was Rodriguez. Last Friday in Belfast, I had some money on the opponent at 16-1, just because I think that basically from here on out, I'm going to be betting the opponent every single time against Conlan because he is so vulnerable. Do you think he's an accident waiting to happen, or do you think he's, we should sort of treasure him as a kind of Irish Gatti, as they've nicknamed him?
Well, that was the phrase I was just about to use, accident waiting to happen, and he is. But he's fun, and again, he's one of those guys where he has a bit of the Amir Khan about him. You don't take your eye off the fight because he could be on the deck any minute, or he could put his opponent down. He is a very, very exciting fighter, but let's be fair, he's been in absolute wars with guys who are not at any particular level.
Yeah,
it's not like Gatti where he was in wars with. I mean, granted, he had some absolute mismatches at Torre, but he was in theory world level or against guys who were ranked higher than him or around him.
Yeah,
Conlan's been in some absolute battles with some guys. If you were to think, right, well, if they were matched with other domestic rivals, how would the fights go? I don't think they'd be put down. I don't think they'd be hurt as badly as Conlan seems to continually get. But he's a commodity for Box Nation right now.
He's great. I will always
people want to watch.
Yeah, and I looked at the card on Friday night and I thought, bloody hell, I haven't heard of 90% of these fighters. I think I'd heard of Geraghty but never seen him before. And then I saw Conlan at the top, and I said, do you know what? I'm going to watch that because Conlan 9 out of 10 times, like you say, will give you action, and it will be a memorable fight. And the guy he was fighting had been stopped something like 8 times at Nicaraguan level. Like I think he'd fought for a world title once and got knocked out in like 3 rounds. But he'd been stopped 6 times at domestic level in Central America. So like, he's going to war against sort of the equivalent of I don't know what's the sort of accurate equivalent, but it's kind of at British level, I suppose, isn't it? That's the kind of level he's fighting at, and he's in absolute blood and guts wars every time. But look, the guy will do incredibly well to win a world title. I think he could get very badly beaten against certain guys in that division, but I wouldn't mind if he never fights for a world title and just is in another 15 wars over the next 5 or 10 years. No problem with that at all. I think, and also to be fair to him, I think he seems to know it. He knows that he's kind of an entertainer rather than like an elite talent. I think his brother is much more a case of I'm going to win a world title. That's what I'm in the game for. I think Jamie is much more I'm in it to entertain. And if I lose, I lose. But the crowd are the most important thing, and it's safe to say that you get your money's worth every time you go and see him. And he's the sort of guy, if he was fighting in London, I'd make an effort to go and watch, regardless of the opponent.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like I said, it's an all-action style is what I don't know if it's something that he would choose either. I think it's something that's kind of been forced on him. He's been sort of pushed in fights by opponents, and like I said, if they keep matching him with those type of guys, I think you're going to get that result every single time. And in theory, you can't fight like this every time without there being some kind of repercussion. And I think that will be him getting absolutely banjoed by someone. But yeah, for now, why not? It's enjoyable. There was no one there though. Bloody hell, there's about 4 people in the crowd, but it's a shame because hopefully now people will turn out for him. because they know they're going to get a decent fight. Like you say, I'd watch him again. I mean, I watched it because I thought it could be good, and it ended up being everything that I thought it might be.
Yeah. Yeah, same as you. I looked at the opponent's record and I thought, okay, this guy cannot punch at all, and he's been knocked out like 7 or 8 times. He is rubbish. But chances are he'll probably still hurt Conlan at some point, and Conlan will get cut or his eye will swell up, and it will turn into a war. And what you said was exactly right. I got up in like the 8th round to go and make a cup of tea. I came back a minute later, and Conlan was on the floor being counted, and Bunce was squealing, about how he'd been caught and stuff. Just a quick shout out to Bunce as well, who I don't hate that much, but Jesus Christ, if I ever have to hear him on commentary again, I don't know if I've been under a rock or something, but I'd never heard him on the microphone doing play-by-play before, and he was so bad, to the point where he would say something, that Johnny would make something that was so biased, Johnny Nelson would blush. And Barry Jones would have to say, Barry Jones would literally say, I don't know about that, Steve. and then the conversation would just end. Like, Barry had to sort of call him out on it several times. And, Jones is a fairly diplomatic guy, but he literally had to shut Bunce down at numerous points. Sorry, Paul, go on.
Well, I thought when Bunce has done 5 Live, for example, I think he's been really good because he only gets 30 seconds to talk. And it's normally in kind of cliche sound bites, but it works. You've got Costello talking 3 minutes, and then Bunce comes in, that's happened, this has happened, that's happened, and then that's it. Him done. Having him consistently talk through a round is a disaster. And I don't dislike Steve Bunce. I think he's all right, but that it's a character that works as a presenter. I'm not exactly sure it's. Yeah.
It doesn't work
as a commentator.
Yeah, absolutely, it doesn't work at all.
It's why Nelson doesn't commentate. Johnny Nelson he can't present, but he wouldn't commentate either. He's not suited to it. You either present or you commentate. I think there's very few that can do both successfully.
Could you have imagined the late great Jim Watt doing an interview, for example? It just wouldn't. It just wouldn't work at all. And I think Bunce, give him his credit. I think he generally is a good interviewer, especially after the fight. I think he's quite. He'll sort of usually try and find some original spin on what's going on, but he can't do play-by-play. He's abysmal. But yeah, right. So we'll leave Conlan to sort of go on his merry way. Just quickly to skip over the last of the roundups. Andrade versus Kulkai. I haven't watched it. I probably won't watch it. I heard that it should have been a unanimous decision, but equally, look, I'm a really big Andrade fan, but I'm not interested in these types of fights anymore. So, Paul, if you've got anything to say about that at all, because I know it was a bit of a stinker.
No, I didn't watch it live. I watched it the following day. I think it was a shame because Andrade, he's got a reputation of not being the most exciting fighter, despite being technically very good. And it wasn't the best fight. I think it was much closer than it probably should have been. But yeah, it should have been a unanimous decision. I thought he won the fight by 3 or 4 rounds, but it was unnecessarily competitive from Andrade's side. And when you need someone to really grab 154 pounds by the balls and kind of, prove to people it's not this stinker of a division that most fans believe it is, that wasn't the performance to do it, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a shame. But it looks like the Lara fight might happen now because he's got the regular and Lara's got the super belt or whatever it is, and maybe they'll be unifying them. So we'll hold our cross our fingers and hope that one comes off. Just the final 2 fights that were actually exciting. Very quickly on Thurman Garcia. Funnily enough, for a fight that was pretty much almost a 50-50, without sounding big-headed, it played out pretty much exactly as I thought it would. I thought Thurman would win a competitive decision, and I had it about 8-4. I thought the right guy won. I thought Thurman was a bit quicker. I thought he started really well, and then I thought Garcia just kind of did the Garcia thing where he fights every round at the same pace, and Thurman took a few rounds off and Garcia sort of came back into it. Forget the actual fight, which wasn't as dramatic as we'd hoped. Where would you like to see the winner and the loser go next? So their immediate next fight, what would you like to see?
Garcia Khan, I think, is just the most obvious fight in the world to make for me. The first fight was, while it lasted, was exciting. Both of them now are in a position where they maybe need each other a little bit. Khan has just chased and done nothing. It's a fight I think that Khan has a chance in.
They both need a name, don't they?
Yeah, and I think they're both PBC guys, or they're both Heyman guys. It's an easier fight to make. I don't think they'll go that route. I've been a big fan of Garcia. I really liked him. I mean, I've taken quite a bit of heat when he was, in poor fights, or some of the stuff his dad's come out with about not wanting to fight the best. But at the end of the day, he fought Khan as an underdog, fought Matisse as an underdog, not a massive underdog, but he was betting wise. Matisse was favourite, and against Thurman, I thought that the first round really shook Garcia up, and I don't think he ever really quite settled into the fight. Thurman fought better than I thought he was going to. I thought he was fairly impressive. Thurman now believes he's the best 147-pound fighter in the world. He isn't. That's Manny Pacquiao. That fight isn't going to happen. So what do you do with Thurman? It's difficult. He's got the size. He could go up again. But I don't know. The winner of Brooke Spence potentially is an avenue they could go. I mean, there's a lot of good fights being made at 147, but there is no obvious summit. If you look at it almost as two semi-finals, Brooke and Spence, and Thurman and Garcia, the winners fighting the winners. I think that a Spence-Thurman fight, for example, could be very interesting. But obviously, for me, Manny's still number one.
Yeah, Manny is number one, but yeah, like you said, sadly, that fight's not going to happen. Obviously, ideal world, Thurman Pacquiao to determine definitively who is the number one. And then the winner of that could fight the winner of Brooke Spence. Ideal world, sadly, not one we live in. I think you could. I'm leaning towards, just because the timings won't work out quite. It won't work out that well for Thurman to sort of wait around for 6 months for the winner of Brooke Spence. And I think Thurman will want to be active, and because he's sort of got a bit of momentum back now, I think, after he'd stalled for a while. Porter and Garcia, he's got the momentum back. I can see Thurman Broner next, just because I think it's an easy sell, and I think they might just want to fuck Broner off. And then maybe the winner of that, which would almost certainly be Thurman, would fight the Spence Brooke winner. That's my early prediction. No idea what will happen, but I could see Thurman, purely for lack of opponents, maybe fighting Broner and hopefully knocking him out. And then just a quick one, Paul. Last wrap up. Stevens versus Lemieux. Simple question: was it the best KO of the year so far?
I'm a big fan of a one-punch knockout, so I think it's better than Garcia's latter cannon, because I thought, obviously, as a combination, I think that a one-punch hammer always looks more impressive. So I would edge it over that. So I'd probably say yes. At the minute it is, but it's March. And let's be honest, I think my knockout of the year last year was, I think I gave it to Hassan and Dam.
Lennox Clark.
And that was in what? No, well, Lennox just gets it he's going to get fighter of the year honours this year after he cleans up. That knockout from Lennox was fantastic, to be fair.
Who did Endam knock out? Bracero?
Was it Blanco, or was it? Yeah.
Yeah,
so
right.
Yeah, that was my knockout of the year, and that was what, December the 20th or something like that. So you never, like any of these awards, you have to leave it very open. But certainly so far, it was a left. First of all, when someone throws a left hook like that, it's beautiful. And those two, that was a smart fight to make. You could have easily made a case for both going into it. And Lemieux, he's a banger, basic in a lot of ways, but he's an absolute banger, and that was a beautiful shot. So yeah, I'd give it over that. I mean, got a lot of people would still pick Garcia, and I can understand why, because it was very dramatic. But yeah, the single punch is what always tends to win it for me.
I think one of the things, I actually watched Golovkin Lemieux, and I watched Lemieux versus Tapia back last week, sort of before the Stevens fight. And in each fight, Lemieux rehydrated to around 175. And yeah, I actually agreed with HBO that he looked a bit kind of, not fleshier, but he looked a bit sort of thicker than usual. He will really struggle if he has to go up to 168. So he'd better hope that he can sort of trim himself down a bit more and stay at 160. Can you imagine a guy like Lemieux against a De Gale or a Callum Smith or whatever? They'd be sort of 3 or 4 inches taller than him. David Lemieux's arms are about the length of a child's arms. Genuinely, he's got proper sort of T-Rex. He's got like the same reach as Rigo. He will really struggle if he has to move up. So yeah, hopefully we can see him. I'd quite like to see him against Eubank Jr. Again, probably won't happen because we don't live in an ideal world. But I think that'll be a great fight. Or possibly Lemieux against a guy like Kurt Zidze, who's fighting Tommy Langford. I know that, again, it won't happen because of the belts and everything, but that'll be a great action fight. We'll see where he goes, but look, we all like Lemieux. He's willing to fight the best, and again, like Eggington, he brings it every time. Now, Paul, that's the previews done. Thank you for bearing with us. We'll have to skip through this fairly quickly, but I know the reason you came on is obviously to discuss boxing's return to its spiritual home of Birmingham, with the massive card announced for, when is it? May the 5th or something like that? Is it?
May the 13th.
May the 13th.
At the beautiful Barclaycard Arena, the formerly known as the National Indoor Arena in Birmingham. It's, obviously, I'm a big Midlands mongo when it comes to fights like shows like this. What I really like about it is every single fighter so far, because there is still scope for people to be added, they're all Midlands fighters. That doesn't do a great deal for people outside the area, people watching it on TV, because the reason why so many of the Midlands shows have been terrible, and some of them have been real stinkers, is because we had the Joshua one when Callum Smith was on it. Guys from outside the area fighting absolute dross 1-round fights. One of the cards I think was done by like 9:45. But the area's grown from having 1 or 2 potential guys you could put on it and some ticket sellers to now having a genuine world. This is one thing, again, your fight doesn't get enough credit because of his weight class. A genuine world champion who beat not the best in the division, but a good fighter. He doesn't have a regular belt, an interim belt, or anything like that. It's a genuine world title. I can't tell you really much about his opponent, which is a problem, but that's super flyweight for you. Sometimes there's a lot of quality there, but the rankings are quite shallow. As they're shallow in England, and they're even around the world. The bottom of the top 15 isn't the best. Obviously, Eggington.
Sorry, just to finish on Yafai. To his credit, we'll give him a soft first defence as a sort of grace period, because, like you say, Concepcion was past his best, and I think most of us picked Yafai to win. You and I know, certainly did pick him to win, but he was still a proven world level guy. He wasn't a Charles Martin or or sort of some unknown guy who got a vacant shot through politics. Concepcion was a proper world champion, and Yafai dominated him and totally deserved to win. So full credit for that. And to his credit, since then, he's repeatedly, and I think this hints at what you said about the division being a bit shallow, or at least in terms of name value. Almost every interview I see with Yafai, he talks about unifications, doesn't he? Unification, which is, look, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt for now. I know that Hearn has, he can promise the earth, can't he, and then not deliver. But I'll give Yafai credit. I'll say that I believe him, that he wants unifications. And if you've got 2 champions facing off in that division, those are some high level fights. So hopefully, towards the end of this year, second half of 2017, we can see him bring a real name over in the division.
Yeah, I hope so. And again, because the money isn't there, these are the kind of fights that can and should be made over here. I mean, obviously, if the offer, I don't think that Cal would shy away from fighting outside the UK, but there's no reason why a unification or a high level fight shouldn't happen in England. If not Birmingham, then as part of another show. And like I said, there's a huge amount of talent that Yafai has. It was difficult initially. A lot of people thought he was quite overrated because of the guys he was in with, but it is a hard division to match fighters, and it was a massive leap when he fought Concepcion, even if he was certainly past his prime. And he boxed beautifully that night. And his brother, again, is not quite as exciting as Cal, and Cal's not exactly Mickey Ward. But Gamal, again, a huge amount of talent. I like the fight they put him in with Sean Davis, because, again, another good bit about this card is that a lot of the fights, they could have picked different opponents and just thrown them in, but going down that card, Sean Davis, again, a Birmingham fighter, he won't win that fight. Gamal will beat him, but he's really going to be up for it. Ryan Kelly, Adam Harper, again, both unbeaten guys, sort of 7-0, 8-0, both from the area, and it means that little bit more. And I know people have slagged off Gavin versus Dave Ryan, but give me Dave Ryan over the kind of opponent I thought they were going to put Gavin in with. Dave Ryan may have been stopped by the obviously very, very talented Josh Taylor. But let's be right, Frankie has not lived the life, got knocked out in his last fight. He's had so many troubles outside the ring. Why should he get a better opponent than that? I think it'd have been unfair almost to hand him a real top quality fight or a fight for a belt. He's not earned it at the minute.
Right. Yeah, Paul, it brings me on very nicely there. Thank you for that to Frankie Gavin, because obviously I know that you're a sort of Gavin fan, and I think we all were initially. He's obviously was a very, very talented guy. You mentioned the contrast with Eggington. You know, Gavin's got 1,000 times more natural talent than Eggington, but the work ethic is obviously at different ends of the spectrum. I think Gavin, in some ways, embodies many of the worst traits about British fighters in terms of the entitlement, the tendency to sort of always shift the blame onto other people and all the rest of it. But equally, I can see that in some ways he has got a lot of talent in the ring. And, you know, he's had some really good performances. I thought what he did to, was it Rendell Munro when he knocked him out in like 8 rounds or whatever?
Denton Vassell.
Denton Vassell, sorry. That was a brilliant performance. I remember thinking that Vassell had a good chance going into that fight. And Gavin absolutely off the back foot took him to school. Great performance. But equally, he's been really underwhelming at times as well. And I remember, I'm sure I've told this before, but I was in the arena for Brooke Gavin. And I basically, you know, I paid my money to see Selby Gradovich and to see Mitchell against Linares. And I left before the main event because I just knew that Gavin wasn't going to try and wasn't showing up to win. And, you know, he quite clearly, he went into his shell very early that night. And just, you know, it was very obvious to anyone watching that he didn't belong at that weight class. So my question to you is, Paul, forget this, you know, I agree with you. He deserves a get well fight. So I've got no issue with this matchup. Do you think he will ever make 140 consistently, hand on heart?
Honestly, no. He's got a better chance now than he probably has in a while because John Pegg and Coonahan work their guys hard, you know, and I think it'll be a bit of an eye-opener for him. I'd like to think it is, being in the gym with some of these kids who they do sparring on a Sunday, for example, which doesn't sound that unusual, maybe people listening in, but for fighters to drag themselves out of bed to go and do sprints or sparring on Sundays, and they get a hell of a turnout. You know, the East Side gym that he's at now, you know, it's...
Can I ask him? I saw recently that he changed trainers and sort of moved across town to Eggington's gym. What was the reason behind that? Was it purely just he thought, look, I'm going to try something different, or was there like a fallout or anything?
Well, no, him and John Pegg, who's Eggington's trainer, have been close for a long time. They've known each other for a long time. If I remember right, I might be wrong saying this, but I'm sure they live on the same street or something like that. You know, they've always known of each other, but obviously Frankie had a long relationship with the previous trainer. And this move to Yafai's trainer was, I don't know, again, it was kind of he saw it as, I'm too comfortable with Tom Chaney. I'm going to move to Max McCracken, and this is going to be, you know, my new start. And it just wasn't. He didn't. The weight disaster that was the Eggington scenario, which has happened for him too many times in his career. Obviously, going back to the Olympics, which was just a cock up completely. What this represents is genuinely his last chance. He's with a trainer who really cares. And I'll tell you what, John Pegg. We're going back to the Eggington Malignaggi fight. My favourite bit of that fight was when Malignaggi got knocked out. He collapsed in Eggington's corner. Eggington's just got the biggest win of his career. He's running around the ring celebrating. John Pegg is with Malignaggi, helping him to his seat and giving him some water. And he's a top guy. And if anyone can motivate and get Frankie in shape, it will be him. Frankie Gavin can't do 140 pounds. He just can't, and he won't. I'd love to be proven wrong. I'd love to see it, but he just can't do it.
This one's what is it at 145? This one, and he's with the
aim of 145 against Dave.
Yeah, with the aim of moving down. I mean, look, maybe he's fooling himself, but I think, look, if you can't do 140, if you're never going to get there, then what's the point of doing 145? You know, you might as well just cash out at 147 because, you know, he has no chance above British level at 147. It's never going to happen. The guys are just too big. No. But equally, I mean, maybe he just cashes out against British level guys at full welter. I don't know. I agree with you. I'm very skeptical because every single time this has happened before, Gavin has come out with an excuse and it's gone wrong, basically. But look, I'm not a fan of the guy. But I'd love to be proved wrong. Same as you. I'd like him to go down to 140, partly because there are no good British fighters at 140 really. Or sorry, there aren't no, but there are few British fighters at 140. 140 is quite a barren division generally at the moment. So Gavin, if he could consistently make that weight, could actually beat quite a few of those guys. You know, he'd be comfortably top 20 if he could make the weight healthily, wouldn't he?
Yeah, and that's it on talent, and so because suddenly when you compare him to, say, obviously like a super prospect like Josh Taylor, but just from a physical matchup point of view, him against a Josh Taylor, or in a long way away from that level, but against a Ricky Burns, he'd match up. When you see him fight against, you know, guys like Vassell and Eggington, you know, big guys, and Brook, I mean, good God, the physical difference between the two of them, you know, he's not a 147-pound fighter, and he's made a living there when he shouldn't have done. This Dave Ryan fight I think is as much a physical test of whether he can drop the extra 2 pounds properly. He's got, you know, 8 weeks to do it. But it's a big thing going backwards. I remember, I've told this story 100 times, but I saw him before the Bundu fight on the Thursday, so the day before the weigh-in, and we asked him about this question about dropping the weight, and he said, "Look at me." He said, "Where could I lose 7 pounds from?" And he looked awful. Now, he looked awful because obviously he hadn't made the weight correctly, but I don't know if he can drop it. I hope so, because he has a chance there to do something. At 147 pounds, he's done. He got physically beaten up by Eggington. He won every round that Sam didn't put him down in, for me. But physically, he was not a match for him. Boxing-wise, far too good. Physically, couldn't compete.
Yeah,
and he'll have that problem. He'll have that problem against anybody.
It was a physical mismatch, wasn't it? Completely. And it would be a physical mismatch against Amir Khan. It would be a physical mismatch against Keith Thurman, against, you know, imagine a guy like Sean Porter, what he'd do to Gavin. He completely ragdoll him, wouldn't he? And Porter's not even the cream of the division. But imagine a guy like Errol Spence, for God's sake. He's twice Gavin's size. You know, and maybe Gavin needs to get on the steroids, I don't know, and help himself boil down. But yeah, when you see sort of guys like Canelo making 154 and Gavin's only one division below, and you just think, yeah, you know, this is no good. There's something wrong here. And I think, like you say, it's a case of him trying to crash the weight rather than sort of taking it off responsibly, and maybe changing his habits and training 7 days a week or whatever it is, however symbolic stuff like that might be. Maybe that'll help. And yeah, good luck to him. I'd like to see him give it one last good go, purely because I think the division would be much more interesting with a couple more sort of Brits near the top at 140. And also, we mentioned this off the air, but if Frankie Gavin somehow beat Ricky Burns at 140, several people on Twitter, I think, might genuinely kill themselves, and it would be one of the greatest nights. Right? Are we saying it would be up there with? It would be the British Chino versus Brono, wouldn't it? If Gavin just dominated Burns and like iced him in Scotland or something.
Oh, it'd be amazing. Like I wouldn't get out of Glasgow alive if he won that fight, because Pops would have murdered me, and Brian by the time I'd left the arena. So yeah, I'd love to see it. Like I said, because I don't know if I can just. I think Gavin he doesn't deserve it. He doesn't deserve the opportunity. But if he can do things properly and he can be given that fight, I'd give him a chance. But I'm biased. I like him, and when you watch, there was times in the Eggington fight where he boxed beautifully. You know, really beautifully. There's very few British guys who can put their shots together like him. The variety, the angles. But physically and the way he's looked after himself, it's just not been right. And he's his own worst enemy. There's no one to blame. It's not a trainer's fault. It's not injuries. It's everything else. That's his problem. Yeah,
I agree with that. Right, now, just quickly, Paul, because again, I'm wary of your time. Quick rapid fire questions. In light of Frank Warren winning the purse bids and getting Gervonta Davis over here for his shot against Walsh, and Eddie Hearn losing the purse bids and shipping Callum world-level Smith off to fight Anthony Dirrell somewhere in America, is the balance of power shifting? And will you be offering a formal apology to Mr. Warren and Queensberry Promotions?
No, because he's still got about 10 years worth of recover from, but it's a good start. I was shocked, to be honest, when this fight was announced. Not that the fight was announced, but that he was going to come over here. I don't know what they're paying him, but I bet it's good. It's a fight that's going to lose money because Gervonta's purse won't be covered by tickets alone, and I don't think BT have spent massive amounts on this deal. So yeah, I mean, fair play. What a bloody hard fight it will be for Walsh. I think Davis is, it's raw talent, but there's ability behind it as well. He's big at the weight. I think the time is now for Walsh. He's been circling and dangling around this world title shot for what seems like forever, and it just so happens that he's got it against a guy who is potentially a future star. He's not there yet. He's had one good performance that we've seen. But yeah, it's a very, very good fight. And if you look at the amount of guys that are willing to come here now, I know the comparison you're going to make now is because with the Callum Smith thing, different levels in terms of money. I wouldn't spend $1.4 million for a Callum Smith fight either. But it just shows one thing that Warren has done, and he's done this numerous times in the past. He's been willing to take an absolute swing to the balls on a show if it means getting a certain fighter or a certain opponent over. It's a risk and a move that Hearn has just never done, and I understand why he doesn't do it, but as a fight fan you almost wish sometimes he went, you know what, sod it, I want that fight, I'm going to pay more than it's worth, and not just a bit more but a lot more. And Warren, like I said, has done that many times. So fair play. I hope people go, because it's a chance to see a very talented kid.
Yes, I agree. I actually might try and go to that. Obviously, the undercard will be abysmal and will be about 15 fights long. Now, just very, very quickly, again, rapid fire. Saunders versus Golovkin. Do you believe it will happen in Kazakhstan in June? Yes or no?
Yeah, do I believe it will happen? I'm going to say yes, purely because I think that Billy's let the belt go for a reason. I think he knows he'll fight Golovkin. Will he fight him in Kazakhstan? Probably not. I think he'll fight Golovkin, but I think he'll fight him in either America or in Europe.
Oh, is it? Has he vacated?
Is Kazakhstan in Europe?
Saunders
He's not vacated, but there's
but
there's the interim. So Kutsid is fighting Langford for the interim belt on the basis that Saunders can't defend his title. So for me, I think that's been done very much on purpose.
But Loeffler has,
because there's a major fight.
In the interviews, Loeffler has repeatedly talked about the next fight being in Kazakhstan, back in his hometown. I don't know if he hasn't mentioned an opponent, although there's lots of rumours about Saunders, but he has said sort of dozens of times in the last few weeks, we're trying to get Gennady to fight in his home country in June or whatever. Be a good, I mean, that's the epitome of selling your belt, isn't it? Going into Golovkin's literal backyard. That's Saunders realizing, I think he's sort of cashing out at the weight, at least. Right now,
well, I think Saunders has been sat. Sorry, Saunders has been sat waiting for an offer from one of the big two, hasn't he? That's what he's been spending the last 18 months doing. He wants the big fight, whether it's. I don't think he cares whether it's Golovkin or whether it's Canelo. Canelo is very unreliable in terms of how many times he fights and who he's going to fight. So Golovkin's the better option. I don't think Saunders cares if he gets knocked out. I think he's, again, as a decent sized good boxer, it might be interesting. But yeah, you'd certainly heavily back Golovkin to stop him.
Yeah, stop him in the second half of the fight. I expect probably. I don't see how Saunders could stand up to the body shots, really. Now, again, one word answer. Pacquiao's next opponent: Jeff Horn, Adrian Broner, Terence Crawford. Who's it going to be?
Well, it's not going to be Terence Crawford.
Or is it going to be another not on that list?
The way they've talked is literally a case of, right, which country or what destination offers us the most money. So it actually leaves it very open to a lot of guys. I'm surprised that the likes of ITV or Box Nation haven't looked at the Khan Pacquiao fight as a pay-per-view event. It wouldn't get 32 million like the pretend fight with the Arabs would get, but there's got to be some money in that. It won't be Crawford. I don't see it being Broner. I really don't see that fight. So I would probably say for me, the front runner is a Khan fight. But all bets are open at the minute with Pacquiao. He could fight literally anyone if the money was right.
Okay, and last one, Mikey Garcia said yesterday that he wants to fight. Weirdly enough, this sort of a bit out of left field. Garcia said yesterday that he wants to fight Keith Thurman next. Is that a good fight? Yes or no? And would Garcia have a chance? Yes or no?
Is it a good fight? Yes, again, because Garcia's got the size. Could he go up? You know, it is a jump against a big welter. Would he win? I'm not. I like Garcia, but I'm not one of the Garcia fanatics. I know you're a big fan of him, aren't you?
But I don't think he beat Thurman at 147. Bloody
no, I don't think
he'd.
I don't think he'd probably touch most of the top guys at that weight. I think he's good where he is now. I don't see maybe jumping up to, because he's at 135 now, isn't he? I think jumping up to 140 is a possibility, but it's a hell of a jump. And like I said, do it in stages. He might say he wants that fight now. He just seems to be the kind of guy that will at least verbally say he'll fight anyone. It's just a case of finding what opponent's gonna work for him. But no rush yet. Let him. He's been out of the ring for a little while. He's had a good win, but let's just get him fighting first.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the last one. Where are we? Is Scott Cardle's run of British title defences the worst that you can remember?
There's been a few guys who have tried to. This is the thing with this stupid Lonsdale belt rule of 3 defences. I don't agree with it. For me, if you win the British title, you win the British title. I think this making them have a set amount of fights when there's so much dross in the rankings at certain weights, and invariably fighters end up trying to manoeuvre. Like I remember when Paul Smith was trying to get Tobias Webb, I think.
Well, Smith refused to fight an opponent ranked in the top 10. He refused. He kept submitting opponents that were, and the board put a statement out because Smith did the usual thing of saying, I don't know why they've stripped me. There was no explanation, blah, blah, blah. I've done nothing wrong. And the board put a statement out saying, we gave Smith a list of opponents ranked between like 5 and 10 or whatever. And he refused them all. And he kept offering guys ranked outside the top 10, like 11, 12, 13, like you say, guys like Tobias Webb. And the board eventually said, no, sorry, like you have to fight. So we're not saying you have to fight in the top 5. We're saying top 10. And Smith wouldn't do it. So, credit to them for sort of calling his bluff on that one. But yeah, this Cardle thing, I agree with you. One of the questions we had was, is the rule about winning the British title outright actually damaging the domestic scene? I think it definitely is, right? Would you agree?
Yeah, I 100% agree, because if fighters waste 12, 18 months of their career fighting, sometimes very poor levels of opponents because they feel like they have to get the Lonsdale belt outright, when reality is they shouldn't feel like that. They should be able to defend it once or 8 times if they want. This notion of we've got to get to 3, I think is very antiquated. That system worked when fighters fought 10 times a year. I don't think it works anymore.
Yeah, I agree with you. Especially when not only do you have Cardle sort of milking it, fighting absolute nobodies, but you have Luke Campbell sitting on his thumbs, waiting to get a shot at Cardle once Cardle's won the belt outright. So it just creates this kind of traffic jam in a division that actually could be reasonably exciting if everyone actually fought each other. Right, we had a couple of other quick questions. If you were a boxer, what brand of gloves would you wear? Strange.
I'd wear the gloves that Floyd and Canelo wore when they fought. I think they were Elvis Grant, aren't they?
Oh, the Grant ones, yeah, the pillows.
Yeah, the shiny pillows, because I know I don't box, so I couldn't tell you the benefit of an Everlast Power Lock over a Grant glove, but I could tell you that they look shiny and they look nice.
You get them in claret and blue, yeah?
Get them in claret and blue. I think the gloves thing is interesting. It all depends on the kind of fight you are. Obviously, power punchers seem to favour more sort of traditional brands, don't they? Whereas like Winning and Grant, they're much lighter or much more padded gloves. Certainly for your brittle-handed fighters makes sense. But yeah, shiny pair of Grants for me.
Well, I know. What was it? Reyes is the puncher's glove, isn't it? The one that all the that Pacquiao used to wear with the horsehair in it. I'll go for some Reyes. Paul and I will meet at a catchweight, a Frankie Gavin style at someday. What, a catch weight of probably, I don't know, light heavyweight, something like that. Be fair. Let you drain yourself down. Right now, very, very quickly, Paul, because I appreciate you're very pushed for time. This weekend, big weekend of fights coming up. Now you can pass on these if you don't care, and then we can just do the big ones. Michael Conlan's debut, and this is no disrespect to Michael Conlan, but I'm personally not that interested in debuts generally. I think they're almost always 1 to 100 mismatches. So I will certainly not be staying up to watch Michael Conlan beat some journeyman in 2 rounds. Although I like the guy, good luck to him. I hope he wins, but I won't be staying up for it. Yeah. Do you care about the Conlan debut?
I care about Conlan a lot. I think that Top Rank have done an amazing job promoting the show and promoting him. Unfortunately, they've put him in with, you know, a very basic start, shall we say? You know, but it was the same for Joshua. It was the same for Luke Campbell. Again, both Olympic medalists. Although that Conlan obviously had a bit of a disaster at the Olympics. What happened to him? No, I'm not interested. If it go in terms of the fight, if it goes past 2 or 3 rounds, I think that's a bit of an issue. You know, this is a showcase for Conlan to banjo the guy in front of a load of Irish fans and get him on side. But I'm not, you know, it takes me a while to get sold on a prospect. I'm very, very interested to what Conlan can do. So I will be watching, but I'm not particularly, you know, I won't be reading too much into the fight.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. Yeah, and I generally just don't care that much about debuts. I also don't really care that much about get well fights when a guy's been out for a long time. So do you give a shit about Andy Lee's return? Yes or no is fine. He's fighting some guy with, you know, dozens of losses.
No, I like Andy Lee, but I don't care about the fight. It's just about getting him out again, isn't it? There's nothing more to read into it.
No, exactly. I'm not sure if it's. I think it'll be on the Top Rank. No, sorry, not the Top Rank. Is it a Golden Boy? No, I don't know. Whatever the one that they put out for free online. You know, the prelims. It'll be on one of them. So I'll probably watch it. I think I'm gonna stay up for the fight. Quick one: Andy Lee versus David Lemieux. Best action fight in the division.
Oh, brilliant! I love that fight. Again, just 2 big, massive punches. What's not to like about that? That's a very good fight to make.
It's not going past 3 rounds, is it? No way.
No.
Right now, very quickly, Quadras against Carmona. That's a fairly easy win for Quadras. Decision almost guaranteed. If I don't know what the odds are, but Carmona went 12 with Inoue. So there's no way Quadras is stopping him. So if the odds are good, I suggest everyone bets on that. Now.
What are the odds on Quadras failing a drugs test? If they should be high, stay up his back.
Yeah, and he's WBC, isn't he? He was WBC champ, so he was presumably doing VADA. But somehow
he doesn't have spots. He has boils. I mean, Jesus, it's state of him.
Did you watch the 2 days, the HBO one with Gonzalez? Because you know that it's a very, very good show. First of all, it's all about, you know, him and the memory of Alexis Arguello, and it's the 2 days before the Quadras fight last year. Great little 20-minute documentary on YouTube if people haven't seen it. But there's a few close-ups of the weigh-in, and because of the lighting, you can just see Quadras's neck and back, and it looks like the surface of the moon. Do you know what I mean? It's disgusting. Yeah, how that guy has not failed a test, it's ridiculous. But I do quite like him. If anyone didn't see it, he gave Gonzalez a Barbie doll at the presser yesterday, and he said something about like sucking his thumb, or, you know, I think it was some sort of homophobic thing. But very funny, and that I'm looking forward to that rematch. Having said that, I am picking the Thai to win. I think Gonzalez is going to lose this weekend. I've bet some money on the Thai guy to. I've got money on him to stop him in the second half of the fight at 14-1, and I've got money on him to win either way at 8-1. I think this is a perfect storm for the upset. I could well be wrong. You know, I like Gonzalez. I certainly want him to win, really, but I think he's about to turn 30. His trainer's just died. He's had a very long career. I thought he looked undersized against Quadras last time out at 115. I think he's too small for the weight. I think he's having an absolute nightmare making 115, strangely enough. He's undersized, but also I think his body's slowing down. Jamie Conlan, if people didn't see it, put up a Facebook post yesterday of him, him in Madison Square Garden with Gonzalez, you know, doing the pose. And they said, did you ask for any tips from him? One of his fans had replied to Conlan, did you get any tips? And he said, no, he didn't say a word to me. The guy could barely stand up. This is a quote from Conlan, he could barely stand up. He's really struggling with the weight. And this 2 day show that I mentioned a moment ago, Gonzalez was pretty tight at the weight then. He's fighting a guy who's a huge body puncher, who's naturally bigger, who hits very, very hard, who almost knocked Quadras out before that fight was stopped on a head clash. And I just feel like Gonzalez has he's peaked physically, but he's also peaked in terms of what he's going to achieve in the sport. There's no way he's going to move up and win a 5th belt in a 5th weight class, or I don't think it will happen. I think he'd be way too small at 118. I think he's reached the heights he meant to reach. He won a 4th belt last time out, a 4th number one spot in a division, which Arguello could never do. He surpassed Alexis Arguello. He's the best Nicaraguan fighter ever. I think this is all set up for if not an upset, a really, really grueling fight that looks a bit like sort of Hagler against Mugabe. That kind of a fight where you think, okay, he's starting to turn now. Do you know what I mean? Where you can see that he's past his peak. So if anyone wants a little bet at the weekend, that's my recommendation. What's his name? Rungvisai or I forget. Rungvisai. I was trying to learn how to say it, but I think he's got a good shot at the upset here, and he's currently still 8 or 9 to 1. So I think that's huge value. Paul, are you picking the upset?
No, I think all of your logic makes perfect sense. I think that everything you said was right, but I don't think this is the right opponent to do that. I think Gonzalez is right. Everyone's pound for pound number one fighter. I think that you're right. I think the weight is an interesting one for him. I think the fact that he's struggling potentially, as Conlan said, and a few others have said, with the look of him. But no, I think he wins. I think potentially, though, the loss isn't that far away. But I don't think that it will be Saturday. I think he wins the fight.
That's interestingly, you can get about 2.5 to 1 on him to win by points, which is a pretty good bet. Gonzalez to win a decision, that is, which is a pretty good bet as well. Because I'd be very surprised if he knocked out Rungvisai, who hasn't been stopped in something like 12 years or something, and is interestingly enough made his debut against former lineal champion Akira Yagashi. So yeah, they don't do things by halves in Thailand. They stuck him in against the lineal champ on his debut, absolutely, and needless to say, he got knocked out in about 3 or 4 rounds. And Paul, just sorry, I'm rushing here because I know you have to shoot off in a sec, but Jacobs Golovkin is the miracle man, as they loved. Did you know he had cancer, by the way? I don't know if he's mentioned it. Literally, I was watching the 24/7, and I was thinking in my head, how long until he mentions cancer? Literally within 90 seconds, it was mentioned. Do you think he's got a shot this weekend, Paul? Do you give him any chance at all?
Well, it's interesting because lots of people survive cancer. Not many people win a world title. So I think that Jacobs' his ability and how he's got so far in his career it's almost. I understand why he talks about the cancer so much, but I suppose it's a selling point in a way. But I think he's just phenomenal with or without. Phenomenal achievement to have done what he's done. But he's in with the best fighter in the world. I'm one of those that if Golovkin does lose, I won't say, told you so. He was exposed by this, was exposed by that. He's too old. He's too this. For me, he should and has the potential to be the best fighter in the world. I think Jacobs is not tailor-made for him because, like I said, he's a good mover, but I think Golovkin will knock him out. I think that Golovkin needs to kind of alleviate some of those little lingering doubts. You could tell the Brook performance frustrated him a little bit, whether it was because he thought that it would just be a blowout. And I think when he took a couple of those punches in the early rounds, he looked annoyed at himself and people were starting to question him. However, if he wants a mega fight with a certain ginger Mexican, then I don't know if it does him any favours to absolutely banjo Jacobs in a round or two. I think that would probably put Canelo off, but I think it'll be a early stoppage for Golovkin. And again, people will criticise him because people seem to always try and find holes in him. He's my favourite fighter in the world. I don't understand why anyone dislikes him, but there are some people that are determined to try and talk down what he's done and his ability.
It does baffle me a little bit. I mean, I can imagine if there are any purists out there, they might sort of criticize him for getting hit a bit too much in the Brook fight or whatever, and that's fine if you're a real boxing sort of Pernell Whitaker style purist. But I think the people who consistently criticize him, I think purely, well, partly it's just they just want to be contrary, don't they? And they just want to stir up some stuff. But I mean, what can you criticize the guy for? He's clearly willing to fight anyone. He gets knockouts every single time. He's active. He fights the best that he can get. He doesn't. There's no videos of him sort of going down on strippers or beating up his girlfriend or getting some girl pregnant and then, I don't know, fucking off to the other side of the world or anything like that. He's a nice guy. He speaks well, and he brings it every single time. I really think the people criticizing him, they're just desperate to sort of be different, aren't they? And yeah,
I think he really gets, and it's been drilled into him, but he really gets what people want when he does these little silly big drama. I won't do his voice because that's just insulting, but when he does these things about being a Mexican style and a big drama show, do you know what? I think he really gets it. And the best thing about him is he can bang, but he can box beautifully when he wants to as well. And like I said, the reason I went to London on my own, which I hate London, as you know, but I went through all that to sit up in the rafters, was a chance to see him live. And I've been lucky. I've seen a lot of very good fighters. I've never seen anyone cut off the ring or maneuver an opponent like he does. He is just if you watch Golovkin, watch his feet and his arms. They're almost like levers. He's got you where he wants, and then when he's got you in that position, he doesn't half put people away. He's brilliant to watch, and I think the matchup is a good one. I think from Golovkin's side, it will make him look good on Saturday, and then let's roll on for that mega fight with Canelo.
Are you saying? Sorry, did you say early knockout was your prediction?
I think he has the ability to do it. I think Jacobs. I'm not quite sure how Jacobs can see himself going rounds. I don't think taking Golovkin rounds is the way to beat him. I think you have to meet him and then hopefully try and take him out or land something heavy because he's good defensively, but he's not great defensively. He can walk onto shots. That uppercut that Brook threw was a good punch, but from a welterweight, if he took a similar punch from an Andy Lee type, for example, or a heavy hitting middleweight, he's going to be hurt by that. It doesn't matter how good a fighter he is, he will get hurt. I think Jacobs, his only chance is to try and meet him and use his, I suppose, would you even say Jacobs has got a speed advantage? I'm not so sure.
I would say I've actually been doing I really don't like Jacobs. He was one of the first boxers to ever block me on Twitter, which I'm quite proud of, years and years ago. I really don't like him in terms of the way his career's gone. I think he's a fake champion. I think he's got the regular belt or whatever it is. Load of nonsense. Not a real world champion. I'm sure he's a nice guy. I think he's massively overrated. And there was a certain degree of luck to the Quillin fight, as I think there always is when you knock someone out within a minute. I think there's always an element of luck with fights like that. Not saying that he didn't deserve to win or anything, or he wouldn't have won the fight in the end. But I think Jacobs has a slight hand speed advantage, and that's literally it. Everything else he does is worse, is visibly worse than Golovkin. It's not really close. Like, the other thing was, I was listening to the HBO podcast, and they were doing their sort of CompuBox analysis. And I know some people don't like the punch stats so much, but this was to do with average punches thrown, which I think can tell you a lot about a fighter. Forget connect rates or anything like that, because that's all down to the opponent. But Jacobs doesn't throw that many jabs. Golovkin throws about twice as many jabs on average as Jacobs, and I think that could be the difference. And I think if Jacobs has to sort of get on his foot, the balls of his feet and jab, I think that will go against his instincts, whereas he does actually quite like to sort of be the one pushing his opponent back and sort of be the boss. I just don't think his defense is good enough. I think he'll get hit early, and it will make him go into his shell. I watched Lemieux Golovkin back recently, as I mentioned before, and if you watch that fight, as soon as Lemieux sits down in his corner after the first round, his trainer shouts in English, "You need to go defensive," because he basically is admitting after 3 minutes, you can't win. You've just got to hope he makes some stupid mistake. And Lemieux, we saw after that, he was just covering up and sort of flicking out the occasional jab and, occasionally swinging for the fences. I think it's going to look pretty similar to that. I might put some money on Jacobs to go into the second half of the fight, because that's about it's almost 3-1. I don't think there's any real value in an early KO, but I'd be surprised if Jacobs went in the first three or four rounds. I think it'll be round 6 or 7, something like that, around the halfway point. I'd be amazed if Jacobs won. I've seen Golovkin get hit by bigger punches than him, and it did absolutely nothing. People forget that Stevens caught Golovkin a couple of times with fairly clean shots, and Stevens is a bigger one-punch guy than Jacobs, and Golovkin just didn't react at all. And he's been hit before by guys who can hurt you. Jacobs has been hit by Sergio Mora, and he was all over the place. So I think, we're talking about two completely different levels here. I don't like Jacobs. I hope he gets absolutely, ruined. I'm going to say 7th round knockout. I think it will go just over halfway, and I think Golovkin will break him down a bit with the jab, and then like you say, his footwork and his ability to cut off the ring, which is he's one of the best at it that I've ever seen. Actually, I'm struggling to think of anyone who's as good at him as cutting off the ring. Margarito was bloody. Margarito in his prime was very good at it, but obviously he wasn't on the level talent-wise as Golovkin. But yeah, hope for a good fight anyway. And also, we've got Glenn Tapia against Jason Quigley next week, which could be a bet for a first-round knockout because Tapia is absolutely done, and Quigley's a very good prospect. I'm quite excited about where he goes. He's been knocking people out for fun recently, and I think Tapia shouldn't be fighting anymore. Paul, just to finish off, 6 Degrees of Tony Dodson. It was John Simpson to Acelino Freitas, and you've jinxed me because I've lost the game for the first time ever. My route was to go John Simpson to John Murray, to Brandon Rios, to Anthony Peterson, strangely enough, to Javier Harrogui, the beloved journeyman, and then he fought Provodnikov a couple of years ago. That's where I knew the name from. And then to Freitas from there. Dewey Powell chimed in with to Acelino Freitas to Lord Barry Jones, to Peter Buckley, to Lee Selby, to John Simpson, which is a pretty good one. That was 4 for Barry. And then we also had Simpson to Coyle to Katsidis to Diaz, and then Diaz to Freitas, which I think is the quickest one. So I've been absolutely destroyed. Oh my God, no, wait. No. I'm getting some outrageously dishonest entries. But yeah, sorry, Paul. Where I'm keeping you, I'll let you go. Have to get you back on at some point, though, mate. Maybe before the Brum card or something, to end of April or something like that.
Yep, definitely happy to come back on. It was, it's interesting. Like I say, it's a Golovkin fight week. If you can't enjoy that, I don't know what you can enjoy. To be honest, it's a lot of people complain and moan about things, but there's only so many times he's going to fight. So he's one of those rare guys that I will stay up till 4 a.m. for. There aren't many of them, and he is definitely one of them.
Exactly, man. He's 30. He's 35. Gonzalez is 30. Enjoy them while they're still here, right?
Absolutely right.
Right. And on that note, thank you very much for tuning in, everyone. We've had quite a few listeners this week. Paul has brought his faithful harem with us. But yeah, thank you very much for listening. And I'll be back in a fortnight. I'm not sure what the fights will be to preview then, but it will be back in 2 weeks anyway. Thanks a lot for listening. Bye-bye.